Picture a surface that kills bacteria without using poison, without antibiotics, without a single drop of chemistry. It simply tears them apart physically. A bacterium lands on it and literally bursts, ruptured by its own weight. And that surface is far more terrifying to microbes than any antiseptic. And nature built it on the wing of an ordinary insect. This is a cicada's wing, thin, transparent, nearly weightless. To the eye, it just looks like a pretty membrane, the kind plenty of insects have. But this wing has a remarkable property. It disinfects itself. Bacteria that land on it die, with no substance, no treatment, no effort involved. The wing itself is a killing trap. And the whole secret is in how its surface is built. Think about how strange this is. We're used to assuming that fighting bacteria takes alcohol, bleach, antibiotics, some kind of chemical weapon, but the cicada's wing manages without any of that whatsoever. It kills microbes through nothing but its shape, not poison, but structure. And one scientist figured out exactly how it opened the door to an entirely new kind of defense against bacteria. And now for the unexpected turn. This bacteria-killing trick is one we borrowed from the wing. And now we're learning to apply it to medical implants, to surgical instruments, and to things dozens of hands touch every day: smartphone screens, door handles, handrails on public transit, surfaces that kill microbes all by themselves with no chemistry involved. This is the story of a wing that declared war on bacteria. First, what exactly is the puzzle here? The surface doesn't release any substances, nobody wipes it down with antiseptic, there's nothing poisonous about it. And yet bacteria on it die one after another, as if something invisible were stabbing them. For a long time, this seemed almost like magic. The answer only emerged once the wing was examined under a very powerful microscope. To the naked eye, a cicada's wing looks perfectly smooth. But magnify it tens of thousands of times, and that smoothness vanishes. The surface turns out to be anything but flat. It's entirely covered in something resembling a microscopic forest. Countless tiny pillars sticking straight up in dense rows. That's the true face of a smooth wing. These tiny pillars are called nanopillars because their size is measured in nanometers, millionths of a millimeter. Picture a field densely studded with microscopic needles or a brush with unimaginably thin, tightly packed bristles. They're so small, they're thinner than the wavelength of light itself. And this nanoneedle carpet is exactly the wing's weapon against bacteria. Now picture a bacterium settling onto this field of needles. For something microscopic, the nanopillars aren't a smooth floor at all. They're a genuine row of sharp stakes. The bacterium is soft. Its outer membrane is pliable. It settles down onto the points and sticks to them. And right here, at the moment of contact, the process that will destroy it begins. Let's break it down step by step. A bacterium has an outer shell, a cell membrane. It's the bacterium's skin, its boundary with the world. When the bacterium settles onto the nanopillars, its soft membrane sags down between the points, like fabric draped over a fence of spikes. In the gaps between the needles, it stretches further and further. The membrane pulls taut, thins out, and edges closer and closer to its breaking point. And at some point, the membrane simply can't hold. It tears. Stretched between the points, the shell bursts, like a taut film pierced from every direction at once. The bacterium's contents spill out, and the cell dies. No poison, no antibiotic. Pure mechanics, stretched, then torn. The wing kills the bacterium with the bare hands of its own structure. And here's the central idea of this whole episode. What kills the bacterium isn't a substance, it's the shape of the surface. Not chemistry, but geometry. The relief of sharp nanopillars does all the work itself, stretching and tearing the membrane open. This is a fundamentally different way of fighting microbes than anything we're used to. And to appreciate just how different, let's compare it to the usual chemical approach. How do conventional treatments, antibiotics, antiseptics, actually kill bacteria? Chemically. They interfere with delicate processes inside the bacterium, disrupting its metabolism, blocking its ability to build its membrane, jamming the gears of its internal machinery. In essence, it's a poison finely tuned against the microbe. It works by exploiting the chemistry of the bacterium's own life processes. And it's exactly this finesse that turns out to be its weak point. Nanopillars, on the other hand, act bluntly and directly mechanically. They don't care about a bacterium's internal chemistry, its metabolism, or its clever internal processes. They simply destroy its membrane physically, full stop. It's the difference between poison and a spear. Poison has to get inside and subtly interfere with something. A spear just pierces through, and it doesn't matter how the enemy is built on the inside. And that difference between poisoning and piercing changes everything. A clever enemy can eventually learn to defend itself against poison over time. But defending against a spear, against pure physical force, is far harder. To understand why that matters so much, we need to talk about the biggest problem facing modern medicine right now: how bacteria are learning to survive. That problem is antibiotic resistance. It sounds dry, but behind it lies one of the major threats to human health. Antibiotics are our primary weapon against bacterial infections, and they've saved countless lives. But that weapon is gradually going dull. Bacteria are learning not to fear it. And every year, this problem only gets more serious. How do bacteria actually learn this? There are countless numbers of them, and they reproduce extremely fast. Every generation produces tiny, random mutation. Occasionally, one such mutation happens to make a bacterium slightly more resistant to an antibiotic. That lucky individual survives while the rest die off, and passes on the same resistance to its offspring. Generation after generation, and eventually, you end up with a microbe the antibiotic simply can't touch. What this creates is an arms race between us and bacteria. We invent a new antibiotic, and over time, bacteria develop resistance to it. We create the next one, and the same thing happens again. The trouble is, new antibiotics are getting harder and harder to invent, while bacteria are adapting faster and faster. And in this race, humanity is gradually starting to fall behind. We need a fundamentally different approach. The most alarming development is what are known as superbugs, microbes that have learned to shrug off not just one, but many antibiotics at once, sometimes nearly all of them. Once infected with such a bacterium, there's often nothing left to treat it with. Our medications are powerless against it, and the number of these resistant microbes keeps growing worldwide. Doctors genuinely worry about a future where a simple infection could once again become fatal. And this is exactly where the cicada's wing comes back into the picture. Because nanopillars have an advantage that antibiotics simply don't have, it's impossible to develop resistance against them. Think about it. Antibiotic resistance happens when a bacterium chemically rearranges itself so the poison stops working on it. But how do you chemically rearrange yourself against something that's simply tearing you apart physically? No amount of internal chemistry can save a membrane that's already been stretched and ripped open. You can't hide chemically from a spear. To survive on a field of nanopillars, a bacterium would have to completely redesign its own outer membrane, making it impossibly tough or rigid. And that's nearly impossible for a bacterium to do because the membrane has to stay flexible and permeable for the cell to function at all. Which means nanopillars attack exactly the one thing a bacterium can't change without dying. Evolution simply has no answer here. You can't cheat physics. And this is exactly why it's so encouraging. Where chemical antibiotics lead us straight into a dead end of resistance, a purely physical approach offers a way out. A surface that kills bacteria through shape rather than poison doesn't trigger an arms race at all. Superbugs gain no advantage against it, they all rupture exactly the same way. The cicada's wing hints at a way of fighting microbes that simply doesn't go obsolete. That's an enormous source of hope. A team of researchers uncovered this weapon hidden in the wing. In 2012, a group led by Elena Ivanova first published a detailed description of this effect on the wing of the cicada species Saltoda claripenis. Under a microscope, they showed precisely how bacteria die on the nanopillars ruptured by them. They turned the mystery of a self-disinfecting wing into a clear, understandable physical mechanism and took the first step toward replicating it. They proved that the cause really was physical destruction of the membrane and not some hidden substance on the wing. The bacterium dies mechanically, torn apart by the points. This was a major discovery. It turned out you could kill microbes using the nanostructure of a surface alone. And once that was clear, an enticing question arose: could the same kind of lethal surface be created artificially? After all, a cicada's wing is wonderful, but you can't exactly coat an operating room with it or stick it onto a smartphone. For the principle to actually benefit people, it needed to be reproduced in some practical manufacturable material. Scientists set out to create a man-made surface with the same bacteria-killing nanopillars. And the solution turned up in a rather unexpected material. That material is called black silicon. It's silicon, the very same material microchips are made of, but with its surface processed in a particular way. It's covered entirely in tiny, sharp needles, which means it reflects almost no light and looks velvety black, hence the name. And engineers have long known how to manufacture it industrially. And these needles turned out to be painfully familiar. So where would this be useful first? One of the most important cases is medical implants. Artificial joints, bone plates, dental implants, anything surgically placed inside the body. Their main enemy is bacteria, which love to colonize an implant surface and trigger serious infection. If the implant surface itself were given this nanoneedle texture, it would kill those bacteria immediately before they could ever get a foothold. Just think about how much this would change. Today, patients often have to take antibiotics after surgery just to prevent infection around an implant. An implant with a nanoneedle surface would defend itself mechanically with no drugs required at all, no antibiotics, and therefore no risk of breeding resistant bacteria in the process. The implant becomes its own defense system from inside the body. Next in line, surgical instruments and hospital equipment generally. Sterility in medicine is a matter of life and death. Coat instruments, trays, and work surfaces with this kind of antibacterial nanotexture, and they become far worse hosts for living bacteria. In essence, medical equipment would gain an additional, permanent line of defense against infection, one that works constantly all on its own. And this matters enormously because hospital-acquired infections are a massive problem. People sometimes pick up dangerous bacteria right in the middle of treatment inside the clinic itself. And those are often exactly the most resistant superbugs. Surfaces that kill microbes mechanically could help break those chains of infection exactly where chemistry and cleaning have already fallen short. One more barrier in the path of infection, but the largest scale application by far lies well beyond hospital walls. Think about all the surfaces touched by dozens, hundreds of different hands every single day. A smartphone screen, a door handle, a handrail on a bus or subway, an elevator or ATM button. Every one of them is a bustling crossroads for bacteria we pass to each other through touch, and every single one could potentially be made self-cleaning. Imagine a phone screen that kills the bacteria landing on it all by itself. You probably already know your smartphone screen tends to be dirtier than most people assume. We touch it constantly, everywhere. A nanoneedle coating would continuously destroy microbes on its surface without any effort from you whatsoever. No need to wipe it down with alcohol, the phone disinfects itself quietly and continuously. Imagine a phone screen that kills the bacteria landing on it all by itself. You probably already know your smartphone screen tends to be dirtier than most people assume. We touch it constantly, everywhere. A nanoneedle coating would continuously destroy microbes on its surface without any effort from you whatsoever. No need to wipe it down with alcohol, the phone disinfects itself quietly and continuously. Now, picture this kind of coating on every shared surface across an entire city. Public transit handrails that don't accumulate other people's bacteria. Door handles in hospitals, schools, and offices that disinfect themselves automatically. Elevator buttons that never turn into a breeding ground for microbes. This could meaningfully reduce how infections spread between people. An entire city with self-cleaning touch points. Now, picture this kind of coating on every shared surface across an entire city. Public transit handrails that don't accumulate other people's bacteria. Door handles in hospitals, schools, and offices that disinfect themselves automatically. Elevator buttons that never turn into a breeding ground for microbes. This could meaningfully reduce how infections spread between people. An entire city with self-cleaning touch points. Stop for a moment and take in the scale of this. The exact same trick, a sharp nanoneedle texture, works on a tiny cicada's wing, on an implant inside the body, on a surgical scalpel, on the screen in your pocket, and on a subway handrail. From an insect all the way up to an entire city. And everywhere, it defeats bacteria the same way, through shape, not poison. A solution that scales almost without limit. Stop for a moment and take in the scale of this. The exact same trick, a sharp nanoneedle texture, works on a tiny cicada's wing, on an implant inside the body, on a surgical scalpel, on the screen in your pocket, and on a subway handrail. From an insect all the way up to an entire city. And everywhere, it defeats bacteria the same way, through shape, not poison. A solution that scales almost without limit. But let's be honest, the cicada's wing is an inspiration and proof that this approach works, not a finished cure-all. Reproducing a perfect nanoneedle texture across a large surface area, cheaply, durably, and reliably, is a serious engineering challenge. The coating has to resist wear, resist clogging with dirt, and survive constant touching and cleaning. Nature supplied the principle. Turning it into a practical technology is our job. But let's be honest, the cicada's wing is an inspiration and proof that this approach works, not a finished cure-all. Reproducing a perfect nanoneedle texture across a large surface area, cheaply, durably, and reliably, is a serious engineering challenge. The coating has to resist wear, resist clogging with dirt, and survive constant touching and cleaning. Nature supplied the principle. Turning it into a practical technology is our job. And plenty of questions remain. How effective are these surfaces against different kinds of bacteria? What happens once a layer of grime builds up on them? Do the needles keep working? How long will the texture survive daily contact and where? Scientists are actively researching all of this right now. Nature fine-tuned its mechanism on the wing over millions of years. We have to figure ours out a lot faster. And plenty of questions remain. How effective are these surfaces against different kinds of bacteria? What happens once a layer of grime builds up on them? Do the needles keep working? How long will the texture survive daily contact and where? Scientists are actively researching all of this right now. Nature fine-tuned its mechanism on the wing over millions of years. We have to figure ours out a lot faster. And that's entirely expected. The cicada was solving its own problem, keeping its wing clean and healthy, not disinfecting our hospitals and smartphones. Our job is to spot the underlying principle in its wing and thoughtfully adapt it to our own needs. The idea of killing bacteria through surface shape alone turned out to be invaluable. The fine details get worked out by engineers for each specific application. So what did we really take from the cicada? Not the literal wing itself. We took the strategy: kill bacteria not with chemistry, but with the physical shape of a surface. That idea is now being transferred onto silicon, onto the metal of implants, and into future coatings for screens and door handles. A principle from an insect's wing could one day help protect the entire world from infection. A tiny cicada, and potentially an enormous shift in medicine. So, it turns out, an unremarkable insect became an ally in one of humanity's most important battles: the fight against resistant bacteria. Right where our strongest medicines are starting to falter, a cicada's wing points toward a way around the problem. It holds a trick our medicine doesn't yet have, one it perfected long before the first antibiotic was ever invented. Nature, once again, turns out to be the wiser one. And the cicada also reshapes how we think about cleanliness and disinfection themselves. We're used to assuming that fighting microbes always requires chemistry: alcohol, bleach, antibiotics. The wing shows us that sometimes the right surface shape alone is enough to leave bacteria nowhere to survive, not poisoning the enemy, but designing the world so it simply can't survive in it. Cleanliness through structure, not through poison. Put it all together. A cicada's wing kills bacteria not with chemical weapons, but with a weapon of shape, stretching their membrane across nanopillars until it tears apart. This isn't something you can get used to, and it isn't something evolution can route around. We cracked that trick, and now we're learning to use it to protect implants, instruments, and the everyday things we touch. Physics instead of poison, and bacteria have no answer for it. And perhaps this is one answer to the looming antibiotic crisis. Not an endless race for new poisons that we're steadily losing, but surfaces bacteria are simply powerless against in principle. Not a cure-all, certainly, but a powerful new tool in our arsenal. And we owe it to an ordinary cicada quietly sitting somewhere on a tree branch, a clue to saving lives found on an insect's wing. Here's the thought to leave with. Sometimes the solution to an enormous global problem hides in the most unassuming place on an insect's wing we'd normally walk straight past. The answer to antibiotic resistance may have been sitting in a tree above our heads this whole time. Nature has already solved many of the problems we're still struggling with. All we need to do is look closer and ask how it managed it. And one more thought tucked in at the end. Our most advanced medicines eventually go obsolete, bacteria adapt to them over time, but the cicada's weapon will never go obsolete. There's no getting used to a spike that's tearing you apart. Maybe the future of fighting bacteria isn't about inventing newer and newer poisons, but about changing the very shape of the surfaces around us, just as the cicada already did. And the future of this principle reaches even further than medicine. Self-cleaning food packaging that keeps food from spoiling for longer. Antibacterial filters for water and air. Surfaces in kitchens, restaurants, and food production facilities. Anywhere it matters to keep bacteria in check without chemistry, this nanoneedle texture could become a quiet, constant guardian. One idea from a wing, and a whole range of ways to make the world cleaner and safer. A tiny wing that kills bacteria through nothing but its shape offers us hope in the fight against infection, without an endless race for new drugs. It all comes down to a sharp surface texture, not poison. If stories like this are your kind of thing, there are plenty more ahead. Next time, how spider silk stronger than steel is teaching us to build ultra-strong yet eco-friendly materials. Until then, keep looking at the world around you and asking, why does that work? Thank you for being with us. If you find the idea inspiring that nature is our greatest teacher, share this story with someone who still enjoys being amazed by the world. We're already preparing the next one, because nature still holds so many secrets waiting to be discovered. See you next time. Subscribe.